This is Tux Tucker reporting for SafeTV904, and in front of us is Rick Gould, the president and owner of Rail Easy. And our viewers would like to know all about railroad safety and how important it is in today's world, as well as give us a little history about yourself and the memorabilia that we have behind you. So we'll start off with you introducing yourself, sir.
I'm Rick Gould. I currently work Rail Easy Logistics, and came on the railroad in 1972 was my first year, so I've got about 41 years experience in the industry. To make a point, every railroad without exception, first rule is safety. That is the most important rule for any railroad, because there are no second chances on the railroad. This is an industry that you do not deal with pounds, you deal with hundreds of tons. Equipment doesn't stop quickly because of the tonnage. Some trains have 100 rail cars on them. They can't stop.
Right.
Safety is of the utmost importance every railroad.
Okay. So with Rail Easy, how did you come about from where you were back in the 70s to having your own company, and what do you do?
Well, started out in 1972 as a switch tower operator. A telegrapher was the old term. They literally worked in switch towers along the railroad with Morse code, communicating and moving the trains from point A to point B. And you would report a train by you to the next tower, to the next tower, to the next tower, to the train dispatcher. And as you reported them, they would mark down on an old timesheet, and mine was in Camden Station, of where the trains were and how they were going to move through the night. I worked in the switch towers from 72 through probably about 1980, and then moved into different aspects of a checker who actually went out and wrote numbers down of rail cars and how they were lined up on a track. And I progressed into customer service, but the most important part and the safety part, even though the people in the offices play a big part in safety, the real on the ground, feet on the ground risk is in the field next to the trains, near the trains.
Okay. And so with your background in saying how safety is important all around, and you know what? It's time to talk about that. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your memorabilia. First off, let's talk about what we have here on the wall.
That is a standard clock. All the switch towers and the train dispatcher's office had a standard clock. Everyone was in sync with the time on that standard clock. Everything that was written down was used on those times. So the clocks were very, very important all through the railroad. Time was very important through all the railroad. So you want to look at some of the memorabilia?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, show us around.
Standard clock. And what I've done here, this picture is actually to depict looking out the window of a switch tower I used to work at Point of Rocks, Maryland. This line here is going down to Washington, D.C. This line down here goes to what they call the old main line, which is the original B&O Railroad. And we used to, as I sat in my seat at Point of Rocks Tower, and I looked out the window, as the train was approaching, I would actually see this view out the window. This other one over here is the same depiction, but at Hancock Tower.
Okay.
Hancock Tower, I believe in West Virginia. That's what a switch tower looks like from the outside. If you notice, it has the call letters in the window. And that's how each tower would communicate to each other by those two letters. HO is Hancock, and I have a depiction of CX, which is a Baltimore tower. That allows you, it was all Morse code back in the day. And everything was a two-letter code. So you would do Morse code to tell you where the train was, and the train dispatcher would write it down. I wasn't there for that. I missed it by about 3 years. But to give you an example, train orders are literally a safety option. Train orders back in the day, and still today, have some function to where a train order actually tells each train where it can and cannot go. This particular train order was written in 1955. And it basically tells you, engine 305, run extra, Penmary Junction to Bex. That's telling this train with this locomotive that it can go from point A to point B without being interrupted and not have another train come at it. Because this is the day when there was no signals, or very minimal signals, so it was all run by this. This was the safety catch to keep trains from running into each other back in the 50s.
Right, so with that important piece of nostalgic memorabilia in your hand, how did trains receive those orders?
Well, this is an interesting part. A train would receive the orders in a couple different fashions. The towers that we talked about, like this one here, would sometimes have a train order hoop that would be up engine length or wrist length. Most of it was handed up by hand. There was a string. This is called a train order hoop. The train order would go. The rope would go through here, twine. The train order, this piece of paper, would actually be inside that rope, that twine, and the tower operator would have to stand up as the train came by and stand up and hold that. The engineer would come by and put his arm through here, and this little clip would literally pull that off, and then he had his instructions. His instructions of where he could go and where he couldn't go. Mm-hmm. If he missed this hoop, he had to stop. Mm-hmm. And that was never a good thing. Never a good thing to stop a train at 35, 40 miles an hour.
And with the size of the train and the hundreds of thousands of pounds that you mentioned, on average, if the train had to stop because they missed the orders, how long would it take for it to stop, and how far would you have to go get to that?
It would take them probably almost a mile to stop a 40-mile-an-hour train fully loaded. So you would have to walk, or they would have to come to you, and you would have to meet somewhere in the middle to get the train order, that they could not proceed without that train order.
Right. And so we also see some other communication devices here, especially on the desk. This is quite interesting. As I walked in, can you go ahead and describe what that is?
This is an actual piece of equipment that we used even in the 80s. It's called a scissor phone, and what it has the old candlestick type phone to it, and you had a headset that you would put on, and you would have a pedal, and you would actually talk into this phone. These bells would indicate who was calling you. 1 bell, 2 bell, 3 bells would indicate whether the train dispatcher was calling you or another switch tower was calling you.
Okay.
And you would speak into these, and that is where the typewriters here, when the train dispatcher would give you train orders, which we just talked about, you would either handwrite them or type them. And this is an original typewriter that I once used. Not the original, but the original type of typewriter that I once used in the 80s, believe it or not, to type up train orders. But this replaced the Morse code. This is what replaced this. This was the next step, and we actually used these up through into the 80s. That would be a train dispatcher's phone. This would be a phone to talk to the towers that are next to you. In other words, they're the sequential towers through the Baltimore area or through any area, and you would communicate to the guy, well, to the right of you, or to the north of you, to the south of you, and everything would have a different ring to it. You would know who they were calling by the different ring, 1, 2, 3, or 4 rings, and you would answer. If you were number 2 ring, you would answer it. The mail bags also would be handed up to the trains. That's an original B&O mail bag for the Vice President of Baltimore Higher Railroad. That's a very rare item.
How old do you think that is?
At least in the 40s. At least in the 40s. And they went forever. They used them forever. But that is just a little side note. My dad probably handled that bag at Camden Station. Another little memorabilia is a station master's hat.
Now, why is it important that the station master is identified at the station? What's their role and what do they do?
He is in charge.
He's in charge?
He's in charge. At the station, he is in charge.
And why is that important in terms of safety?
They have to make sure that the trains are on time. They have to make sure people know that the trains are coming. They need to make sure that the tracks are clear when the trains are coming into the station. all of the above. He's pretty much in control, the station master, on the ground with his feet, feet on the ground at the location.
Right.
So very important job. We got the typewriter, we got the phones, we got the bag, train orders. Those are all old safety methods. The train orders are still used. They're nowhere used as much as they had been. Now you have electronic signals that tell each train where the next train is. So it's very important when you come to a road crossing and there's 2 tracks, just because those gates are down and you see a train pass, that doesn't mean the train is gone. There could be a train coming the other way on the other track. So if you think the gates are down and one train is passed, and you think, I'm clear, why are they still down? You could not see the other train coming in the other direction. If you go around the crossing, which a lot of people do, full-heartedly, you could be hit by the second train that you didn't even see and didn't even know was there. And that's, double track is everywhere in Jacksonville and in Florida.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's road crossings are very, very dangerous spots.
Right. So now we're talking about modern times in terms of electronic signals. So being the owner and the lead person with Rail Easy, what is your job in today's railroad?
My job today is to actually make sure that my customer's equipment moves safely from point A to point B. Whether it be empty cars coming in to load or loaded cars going out, we have to make sure that it's fluid. I work with all of the railroads to interface. I interface with all of the railroads to determine where the equipment is, whether it is on time, if it's not on time, why it's not on time, and we create logs and interface with the railroads to help each other make the freight move fluidly through the system. Now, mine is a small part of huge systems. The Class 1 railroads, the Class 1 railroad is a bigger railroad, let's call it that. It's a CSX, it's a Norfolk Southern, it is a Union Pacific, it is a BNSF. The big railroads are Class 1s. And there's Class 2 and Class 3 railroads. All of them have the same rules. That's the best part about them. No matter how big the railroad is, they all have the same rules, especially all of the safety rules. With the AAR, American Association of Railroaders, all the rules are the same. So everybody knows what the rules, no matter whose tracks you're running on, the rules are the same. So that's pretty much what we do. I did pull up a little interesting picture of what I actually used to work at. This is a history picture. These levers here are where you used to have to pull those levers in different directions to make the trains go from one track to the other. As they were approaching, the train dispatcher would tell you through the phone or through the telegraphy what track you wanted them on, and you would have to line those switches up through those pipelines until that train was approaching. You gave him the signal and he followed it. And it's complex, it's interesting, and sometimes very stressful, but always the safe method was taken, always.
Okay. So with all this information that is readily available to people who actually work on the railroad, what would you say to our SafeTV904 audience about railroad safety on the other side of it as the public?
Well, as the public needs to understand a couple things. One thing is the trains can't stop. And once they're moving, you can't stop quickly. So a mistake on your behalf in front of a train is not going to be corrected by the train. The train cannot steer. It goes straight on the tracks. It cannot stop quickly. If you make the mistake, the engineer will not be able to correct in time to alleviate a problem, the mistake that you made. When the gates are down, that means a train is coming, period. Don't ever think it doesn't mean a train's coming. There are instances where you think that the gates are down and you're being delayed. There is a reason for that gate being down. You will not hear the train coming. 90% of the time, even with the whistle blowing, if you're got the radio on or something, all the noise of a train is behind the train as it passes. If you don't believe me, wind the window down next time. And you may hear the horn, but you will not hear the noise of the train until it's passing you. and that's way too late to correct. Way too late.
Right.
Also on road crossings, if you see something on a road crossing that could impede a train, or a car is stuck on a train, check your local numbers for CSX, for NS, and the FEC, or the major railroads that are in Jacksonville. Those companies have 800 numbers to report emergencies. Many of the railroad crossings are numbered. They may have a number on the railroad crossing, an 800 number, and it'll give you the crossing number. This is very important if you have that, because when you call the 800 number, report an obstruction on the track, that 800 number goes to a section that will report what's going on at that location. They know exactly what the location is by the number that you have given, the crossing numbers on there. If it does not have a crossing number, be as specific as you can. Like the FEC crossing down here at Old St. Augustine Road. There's no number on it, but it is Bayard. And you'll see little silver buildings near the crossings, and all of them have the name of the location, and that's what the railroad goes by. So if you call in an emergency at a road crossing at St. Augustine Road, you say Bayard, and you'll see it on those little silver towers. Look for them next time in case you ever need to do it. And they'll know exactly where that crossing is. The problem is if you call the wrong crossing in, they'll protect the wrong crossing, and the crossing that is actually having the issue, there will be a train coming and not know something's going on there.
Right.
So you just got to understand that the railroad, you don't get a second chance. There's too much weight, there's too much speed, there's too much power to try to avoid a collision once you see the train. It's too late. It's too late then. So respect the railroad. Believe it or not, they were probably there first. So if you just understand that the downside of this is people die every day at road crossings.
Right.
There's hundreds of videos of road crossings that people get killed at. Right. Respect the railroad. There's a product out there, or a group out there called Operation Lifesaver that you may want to get into. Just type into Operation Lifesaver, and I think Tux also knows about this. He may be doing something with them later. They come to schools, they come to classes, they come to work, and they educate you on road crossing safety and railroad rules. It's an excellent thing to do. It's easy to find, and I'm sure Tux will have something on his website to tell you how to get to them at some point.
All right. Mr. Rick, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about what you do and about what your company is all about, Rail Easy, and how you assist in your very own part to make sure that railroads are running safely. And it's been a pleasure to look around the room at history and know that railroad safety is another part of that little cog of making sure that we're all safe. And you're doing a great job in your 40-plus years and making sure that's happening.
41 years.
41 years. 41
the railroad
years.
has only gotten safer every year.
Right.
That's their key.
Right. So I really appreciate your time and showing us. Again, we're going to go ahead and end today by me panning just over your shoulder, looking at the train.
That is Pointer Rocks, Maryland. That is a eastbound coal train. Actual picture of an eastbound coal train looking through the window of Pointer Rocks Tower.
So as we end today with SafeTV904, again, we really appreciate the time that Mr. Gould has put in to inform us about railroad safety and what you need to do in and around the tracks. All right, this is Happy Friday, and this is Tux Taka reporting for SafeTV904.